Hey there, folks. I'm Matt Hansen,
And I'm John Johnson.
and you're listening to
Planes, Trains, and Comic Books.
the podcast where we discuss favorites we've reread, both classic and new comics we want to read, and everything else in between.
And here's the comic we picked this week.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of
Planes, Trains, and Comic Books.
Today, we are continuing our manga March Madness with the book Claymore, Volume 1, which is called The Silver Ride something, right? I don't remember what's the Silver Ride. Slayer, there you go. And yeah, you hadn't heard of this, or you hadn't read this before, but had you heard of it, John?
I think you had mentioned it in passing. All the ones we had for our Patreon poll. This is our Patreon poll winner. And all of the ones that were in it, I think, were ones that were kind of been on, like you might have read, or probably have read, but and may have mentioned to me. But now I have not read any of them. So, but this one definitely not. But yeah, but the cover looked cool, and kind of like the general of like what you said it was about. I was like, okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's the cover's actually what caught my eye with this originally too, because it's different style. It's got like pencils that are colored over, or like pastels or something. So like the art itself with the color kind of was different than everything else that I'd seen that was of a similar style or a similar genre. So like, same with kind of Berserk. Berserk had a different look too. And you're just kind of like, who the hell is this guy on the cover of all of these? but this one stood out, and I think it does stand out. Like, apart from many of the mangas that we've read, it seems to have this thing that mangas don't normally have, which is a singular focus. Like, this is just, at least this first volume, starts off trying to just get across what the main point, like what the main story is of this, like who this main character is, and like sticks to it. And that's unique, right, John? Like for manga that we've read.
Yeah, that's one thing we've kind of joked about for most of the mangas we've read, is that we're always waiting for that extra twist. Like, it seems like, oh, the story's this, and then like, oh, there's also going to be like an evil level, and oh, maybe like there's a surprise twist henchman or something. And then mangas take that like story that you kind of get in general in most graphic novels, and then it's like, also they're aliens, or also they're demon spawn.
Yeah.
And so it's just, they added an extra level of a twist that you're like, whoa, goodness, like this is taking it a little deeper.
They might even add 2 or 3 of those weird twists.
Yeah, which is not, it's not saying that it's bad. It definitely seems like a manga specific.
Yeah,
thing that happens a lot.
It's different than, it's unique to manga specifically compared to North American comics.
Yes. But in this case, it was nice, at least in this first issue. Obviously it can get crazier as it goes along. But this first volume, it was, very kind of singular focused. And the one main twist is like, it's that one thing that you're expecting. Like, that's like oh, okay, this is how like this drives the story. And then bam, we're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And so full disclosure, John, have read 10 volumes of this so far. I am.
Oh, wow.
All 27 of them. And so, yeah, I like it a lot. I think there are some things that I'll mention because it kind of comes up in this a little bit that you could see, but in this volume, you do not get the full like thing that I have gripes with. So, but I'll mention it at the end when we get there. But it's very little. I mean, it's like an art thing. So, we will talk about that when we get there. But this story, I should mention, is written and the art is done by Norihiro Yagi, and they knock it out of the park as far as I'm concerned. The art is badass. The fight sequences are badass. And this book has been, I don't think it's quite Berserk level, but people do compare this to Berserk. They say this is as good as Berserk. I have heard that claim. If that is the case, I have not got there yet with the 10 volumes, but I'm not counting it out. It is still a really good premise, and it is still pretty awesome. maybe if I read Berserk after this, that might change it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like if I had read this first instead of Berserk, that might have made me like this a lot more because it was like the first time I'd read something like this. But Berserk goes to levels that I have not seen this reach yet. So in the 10 volumes. So with that being said, I do think it's still a really good series, and it definitely has that violence factor, which is I think what most people consider badass about Berserk is the violence level towards monsters and demons and stuff. So with that being said, we start off on the first page of this where we see our main character, who is not named on the first page, but her name is Claire, and she is just this armored, smallish, skinny woman who has this giant ass claymore sword that's normally a two-handed sword, but she is wielding it one-handed very skillfully, and she's cutting the head off of a monster, and that's kind of like the first introduction page, and you're just like, oh wow, that's badass. Like what's going on there? And we also see that she has like different looking eyes, like her eyes kind of have like a cat's eye when she's in battle, at least. So like the pupils are like vertical instead of round. So that's interesting. What do you think of her design, John?
Oh, I very much liked it. Yeah, like the cat dragonish eye looking thing was very cool to see, like on the the kind of the close up of the next splash page. And then yeah, like we get right away like she's a badass fighter. She's got this giant sword that she's again normally two-handed. She's one-handed wielding with seemingly looking ease. And yeah, she's very kind of like petite, slim. I I'm gonna compare. Obviously, this came out before, but there's a new Star Wars character. Her name is she's a female, not Jedi, but and that's it. She's kind of in between. Her name is Shin Hati, and she looks very similar in style. She's got like a short blonde
They
hair.
stole it. That's what they did.
Again, they probably might have. I mean, Star Wars takes a lot of from
Star Wars steals a lot of stuff from a lot of things. You're right,
yeah.
John.
The Dune, maybe.
Lots of stuff. Lots of
Yeah.
stuff, John.
But yeah, I mean, I like her design. She's very cool looking.
Yeah, I like her armor specifically. I like that she has some kind of like plate system on her back, like around her neck and things, like kind of different setups than I've seen on other similar armors or like armor for other people. Usually it's all about the front, but she has like this like turtle shell plate thing over her top of her shoulder blades kind of thing. And I don't know. I just thought like I really like the design in her armor. And like it seems thoughtful for what she's going up against. Like it's not all bulky, except around where areas where the monsters might strike her around her neck or her back or something, you know? So I thought it was thoughtful in that way. But we start off after that little battle scene in a city or in a town where there's someone dead on the ground. People are saying, oh my God, this is the sixth one. And we find out this town has been besieged with some kind of monster called Yoma. And as part of that, they're like, we don't know what to do. This thing's killing everybody. And the town elder decides that he makes a call, and he's like, we're going to call in the Claymores, or a Claymore. We put in a request to them, and they have sent someone. So we start off with people in the town being like, what? Claymores? Even though they're besieged with these monsters, right? Like these Yoma are killing people. It seems like Claymores might be considered even worse or similar to these monsters, and they don't want to bring them in necessarily either. And specifically, one of the people who is kind of like resistant to this is a boy named Zaki, and we find out his parents were actually the first people killed by this Yoma that is terrorizing this town. And he's got a little brother called Rocky or Reiki. I don't know how to say it, but and they're brothers, and their parents were murdered. So he's got reservations about this Claymore, and so do a bunch of other town people. But I guess they figure, well, I mean, it's the only thing we can do, but they sure do give us the creeps, you know? And then like right as they're thinking about that, they like walk out of this building where they had this meeting, and Claire, the Claymore person, is sent here. Now, we do learn that the Claymores are not called Claymores, or they don't call themselves that. It's what other people call them. It's like the name the townsfolk give them.
Basically, because of their big sword, like
Yeah,
they
because
didn't
of
really
the
have a
Claymore
name.
sword.
Yeah, they didn't really have a name. I guess otherwise they're just like a
Well, it's either that or Silver-Eyed Witch. So I'm
yeah.
assuming Claymore's a better, you know. If I had to be called something, I'd rather be called a Claymore than a Silver-Eyed Witch. So
That's true. You walk into town, it's like, it's the Silver-Eyed Witch.
yeah, yeah,
Like, yeah, that's definitely sounds worse.
yeah. But I love this reveal where it's like, once again, she just looks like a 20-something slender girl or woman, and these guys are acting like she is horrifying or something. Like these townsfolk are like, I'm terrified of her, but she does have a very piercing gaze. And like I said, when she's fighting, she has those cat eyes, or like you said, dragon eyes. But when she's just on the street, not fighting, just in her normal gear and not pushing it, she has round, normal, like human eyes. So I think that's cool, but it's very piercing still. Like the way she looks at people is just like she's staring right through them. And we kind of find out that that's because she does have a power set. We don't know exactly what her power set is, other than she can wield this really big sword with one hand. But we do know that from what people say as she's walking through them, that she can just pick out a Yoma. Like Yoma can hide in human skin, and like basically they're like doppelgangers. They can kill a person, take over their form, and then kill people randomly through the town as they see fit, and no one will suspect them unless a Claymore comes in, because the Claymore can pick them out of a crowd unless immediately, unless the Yoma, what do they call that? Like hides their aura or whatever.
Yeah, I guess they're probably super old and powerful at that point.
Yeah, usually they can really hide themselves if it's if they have that skill. But so Claire comes in, she walks through this crowd of people who are just staring at her, talking about her like she's not there, saying how scary she looks. And like everybody's kind of freaking out because they think maybe they angered her. Specifically, one guy's like talking shit, and other people are like, hey, watch what you say, she'll fucking kill you, because she's like a monster too. And then, but we do see the younger brother of the brothers whose parents were killed first. His name's Rocky. Rocky's just looking at her like in awe, kind of like, oh wow, she's fucking cool, and she's gonna like kill this Yoma for us. Then we cut to the city elder, who's got a big bag of money, and he's like, oh, here's your money, you know, take it. And she's like, no, I don't collect the money. Someone else will come do that. I kill the monster. So if I don't kill the monster, you don't have to pay anything. But if I do kill the monster, someone will be here a little bit later to collect. So she leaves it at that. She's very taciturn and like just to the point, right? Like she's not here to be friends. She's not here to like hold your hand or anything. She is here for business and only business, and doesn't give a fuck about anything really. So, as she's going around the town, as she walks out, she feels someone's like watching her or whatever. And like we see a flash of her cat eye come out as she senses this person, and she pulls out her sword, and she almost strikes little Rocky, who's been like following her because he's obsessed with her. She's like, what are you doing? And basically he just becomes like a little lost puppy to her. He's like, you're awesome. I'm not scared of you like all these other people. I think you're cool. And like I want to hang out with you. I want you. He does say like it's kind of like he's got a little crush on her, because he does say she's pretty, but it seems to be more than that. It seems to be like he's just impressed that she's so powerful. Did you get anything different than that?
Not really. I took it like he's younger, so it's probably like schoolboyish, like, oh wow, she's really pretty, but she's also obviously really powerful and cool and badass. Like, yeah, I didn't take it as like necessarily like he's like, oh, I want to date her. It's just like, oh, like I'm in awe of this badass woman, and like I want to know everything about her.
Yeah. So, you know, he sits down. She like tolerates him by like, she doesn't like push him away or anything. But he, like I said, he's a lost puppy. He's just following her around, asking her questions. and she's not really giving him too many answers, little things here and there. But uh, it's obvious that like he at least wants to like mimic her, because she like puts her sword in, like stabs it in the ground, leans against it, sits down, and like is like, I'm gonna take a nap. And then he's like, oh, I'm gonna take a nap too. And then he like stabs a stick in the ground and does what she does, leans against it. So he's definitely kind of obsessed with her. But then she finds out as she talks to him, because she's like, oh, why aren't you scared of me like everybody else? And he says like, oh, I kind of actually feel safe around you because my parents were the first people killed by this Yoma. And she's like, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. Um, so then he asks her for her name, and she's like, I'm not going to give you my name because you don't need to know it, and you'll forget it soon enough. Like the second I leave this village, you're not going to remember who I am. So after that little exchange, he goes back to his house, and I guess he's staying with his uncle. And as he comes in, he finds his uncle dead on the ground. And then he's like, what? And then the big twist of this first issue is that it turns out his brother Zaki is actually the Yoma, and has been since the parents were killed. So Zaki killed the uncle and killed all these people throughout the last month or whatever it's been, but pretending to be his brother. And so as he's like, oh, I'm gonna like his guts, the uncle's guts were great, and I'm gonna eat yours. It's gonna be great. Like one thing that is similar in this is the monsters are just straightforward like monsters. Like there's not too much variation in them, I will say.
Yeah.
As opposed, you don't know this yet, but as opposed to Berserk, we'll find that out when you read Berserk this month's extra episode for Patreon. But the monsters in Berserk are very, very creative and imaginative, and they are differing very much like between them. Whereas in this, the Yoma are kind of like a race of their own people, so they all look kind of similar, and they all have similar features and whatnot once they transform from like the humans that they're hiding in. But basically, it just means that they get tall, they get really long arms, kind of look like they're transforming from like Resident Evil virus or something.
Yeah,
like,
that's a good.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a tyrant or something, like those bad guys from Resident Evil. But they get like sharp teeth and everything, and their hair gets all spiky and stuff. So as he begins to attack this kid, his what we thought was his little brother, like luckily he doesn't make any like killing blows initially, because that gives time for Claire, who like bursts through the door, sword, pulled out of her its sheath, and she like gets right in between the Yoma and the little brother, and we get this pretty badass fight scene. I don't know, what did you think of the fight pacing of this comic? I think it's to me, it's got really good pacing as far as like what's happening. You can follow everything, but did you feel that?
Yeah, very much so. I like it kind of like, and then they build as they go along too. Like this first one, it's a little bit, but obviously it's this is the first monster in the first real monster, so she does defeat it with ease. But I do like that, like we get like, again, all of these creatures are kind of the same. They're just kind of like, yeah, like I eat humans, and like humans are no match for us, and haha, and it's very interesting. Like even though like it knows it's a Claymore, it's like, yeah, but you're still more human than whatever.
Yeah.
So
I think that is because they have to introduce this whole concept to us. So this Yoma is kind of like, for us as a reader, letting us know how powerful Yoma are as opposed to Claymores, and the differences between them. So it's kind of, I mean, later on we do see her fight some pretty increasingly dangerous Yoma, but
yes.
but this first one, he's surprised. So maybe he's a younger one. Maybe he's not aware of these Claymores as much as maybe they're only like a ghost story or something, like to the Yoma people, like, now you be good or else the Claymore's gonna come. You eat all the intestines, or else you're not getting dessert of brains or whatever they eat. So like, yeah. So maybe that's what it is. Like he's only heard little stories about them and has never faced one and doesn't know, that they have all these things. Cause he's like, how can you move so fast? And she's like, bitch, I'm half you. Like I'm half Yoma. And that's what we find out from this fight is that what happens is, at least what they explain in this first volume, is that these young girls are, I guess, they're chosen or they choose to be to take in parts of the monster. They don't say exactly how, but basically it's like, I think it's like blood transfusion or something. Or that's what they make it seem like in this first volume. That like they take Yoma blood in, and then that transforms them into being able to fight Yoma fully, but they have they constantly have like a battle inside of them that it's fighting again. Like the human side is always battling against the Yoma about who's going to take over. And if it goes too far, then we find out the Claymores can actually turn into Yoma later on. But in this first fight, it's just him being like, how can you do this? How are you moving so fast and whatnot? But I think that's mainly for our benefit, as the reader getting introduced to this topic or this plot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so this Yoma tries to take the boy, as like, what's it called? A, hostage.
Oh, use her as hostage. Yeah. Shield.
Yeah. A shield. And she just like cuts off his arms. She like, instead of going straight, she goes to the side and like cuts off the guy's arms or the Yoma's arms as he's holding the boy. So now he's like armless. And then we see her transform like a little bit, like she lets more of this Yoma energy out, and you see her face get kind of veiny and distorted like Yoma's are, but it's not as much. There's still a human essence to it. But that's basically, we see like when she goes full fight mode, she does actually start to transform a little bit. And that's what gives her the strength to fight these guys. So it's an interesting, like the way that they show it. I like that, that they kind of show what she has to do to defeat these things. Even though this one didn't seem that like hard for her to defeat, she just like still has to transform so that she can kill him finally, and like cuts him in half down the middle. But she does, she just puts her sword away, transforms back into human, and walks out of the room, leaving Rocky to be sitting like in this bloodstained room, which I thought was pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I love it. He's basically curled up in a fetal position now, like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Yeah, he's not talking or anything. And then like when they find him, like the rest of the town people, they're like, yeah, he hasn't spoken forever, but it's actually like, I don't think he's too traumatized necessarily by what he saw. He's just kind of enamored with her, and he's absorbing or processing what he saw from her, like her transform a little bit, her be a badass. He's deciding whether he thinks he wants to stay with her or not, like follow her, because that's what he ends up doing. He decides like, hey, wait, I want to stay with you, or like he's like, my parents are killed. I don't have anybody else, but I will remember you. What is your name? Like, tell me your name. And she lets him know that her name is Claire. And that's how we end it. Like he kind of runs after her, but we do leave him in the village as she walks out all badass. So, I love the way the second chapter starts. So we see the same thing we saw in the first chapter where she comes into town, and this just starts with her already in the town, and she's walking up to the village elder, and the village elder's like, oh, here's the money we agreed upon, like take it from me. And he's got it in his hands, but then she just pulls out her sword and chops his head off, or like chops his head in half, I should say, like horizontally.
that next splash page of the head, half of the head like flying off from is fantastic.
Yeah, and then and then basically everybody in the town is like, oh my god, she killed the elder. But then he starts to transform into a Yoma, and it turns out he was fooling all of them, and he was just waiting for her to like grab and reach out for the money in order to kill her. But she was able to hit him faster. And I thought this was funny because this is a very like movie thing where like his head is gone, like half of it is, and he's still talking. He's still like, if only you had gotten closer, and like blah blah blah. I thought I suppressed my aura enough, but then he just falls dead after explaining all of that, which I thought was it's very like cinematic. Like you just had to get this out so people understand certain things, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it is very much like that, but it's like we just see her dispatch. She's finished, and then she tells the village people like, "Hey, someone will be by to collect this money. I'm out." So she goes outside of town to wash off because she's covered with blood after that moment because it's all sprayed all over her from the guy's head. And as she's taking a bath, we see this guy appear, and his name is Rubel, and he's got kind of like it looks like a futuristic or some kind of like priest clothes, right? Like he's got long sleeves and long pants, and I don't know. To me, it looked like a priest or something, but or like a Puritan, but like a new take on it. Is that what you felt?
100%. As soon as I saw him pop up and they were talking and he's like, "Oh, you got, did you get the money?" Yes. And like, "I have your next assignment," kind of thing. And I was like, "Oh," so my mind right away was like, "Oh, this is like some like religious head figures. This is probably like one of their like little guys that has like a group of these that he goes to, or one of them that he goes to." And they're like, "Yeah, basically this is like a secret society that protects the world for, or not, maybe not secret, obviously, but this is like a society that protects the world from these Yomas by having these half Yoma, um, half female warriors." And it's like, "Oh, okay." Now I did like this is from this page. I think it was like, "Oh, I really want to know the backstory of like what's going on here."
Yeah, who are these guys? And one thing that's interesting about this scene is she is bathing, so she's naked in like a river or a pond where there's like a waterfall, and he just appears and he's watching her as she's like bathing, and then she gets out to put her clothes back on and talk to him, and he's just watching her. And I thought like I wonder if this is like insinuating like because she's like half monster, he doesn't view her as sexual, or if she doesn't view herself as sexual, or if she's just not worried because she's such a badass. I don't know. Like, what'd you think of this scene?
I figured it was something like that. I figured either A, it's trying to imply like, again, maybe he's like a religious person, so he's like he doesn't look at, and he's she works for them, so it doesn't look at it
I don't think
sexually.
the religious person would have any bearing on that, but
Yes, you're right, as history has taught us.
yeah,
But the thought process kind of led me there, and or like you said, he couldn't try anything if he wanted to, probably because she's a fucking badass, and
yeah.
that wouldn't stand.
Well, there is one panel where I do think he is leering at her because she gets out, she goes to her pants, she kind of bends over to put them on one leg at a time, and he is staring at her ass as she does that. So, like, it seems like, I mean, it could be read as like he just doesn't care, but he does turn his head to follow that and to stare at her. So, um, it's the only thing that they show where there's any kind of like leering between them or between him and her, but like um because most of the time it's just talking, but she does seem like she doesn't give a fuck. Like,
Yeah,
sure, leer all you want, but I'll fucking murder you if I want. Or maybe it's such a relationship that like he is in full control of her because she is just part of this order and she doesn't have any say in what happens. It could be that too, you know?
that's true. Maybe, yeah, like she basically is just doing what she's told, and like so she's just like, okay, like listening and like just kind of going with the normal
Yeah, like this
flow
is
of
just normal. Like she meets this Ruble guy after every job, and he collects the money from the town, and then he sees her, and then um, that ends up maybe some. I don't. They don't ever say this, but you could see it going like maybe he does. Maybe when they're back at the Claymore headquarters or something, he does like have his way with these Claymores or something. I don't know. But they are badass warriors, so it could be the other thing too. It could be a mix of it or something, you know. But
I would, yeah, I would hope not. I mean, like, I get like how you like if you work for someone, as far as like someone has you like under their control and their influence,
well,
right?
I don't think it's work. I think it's more of like if you are born into this or you're abused to think this is your master or something, then you don't
That's true.
even question what's happening. You know what I'm saying?
That's true, because like we're from the first standpoint of this first volume is like like we said, they made it seem more like they're chosen or they are volunteer for this. But I
Well,
think we could
I'll spoil it
assume.
because I've
We
read
could
10
assume.
volumes. It
Yeah.
is, yeah, it is. It doesn't seem like they're actually chosen because we do get a hint of it a little bit later. They show her having a memory of being a little girl and seeing her parents dead from a Yoma. And so then you're like, okay, well, if she was abandoned or she was orphaned at a young age, well, how did she get to be volunteering to be a Claymore? And you could imagine maybe, you know,
Revenge.
right, but like, okay, when she's older, she volunteers. But they kind of later on say like, oh no, no, they literally just take young girls and like put them through this system to make them these things. And they don't really volunteer necessarily. I mean, can a kid that's 9 or whatever volunteer for things that like someone's going
No.
to fully change your body and outlook and all that stuff? Not really.
You're,
So
no, that's true. There's that, and then also they do mention that it's only females that go through this. The men that, and we don't know why, but it's is that men cannot go through. Have never survived the process.
yes, I'll spoil that too a little bit. Basically, it's like they roid out too much from this Yoma blood, so they always turn into full Yoma if they start the process.
So you're telling me men can't control their urges, and that women are much more adept to being able to, hold on to things and like work through and like process things
I'm
better.
not saying anything, John. The comic writer is saying that. So the mangaka is the one making those calls. So
I-
I'm not stepping in any minefields, John, no matter how many you lay in front of me. All right. So anyway, so after she gets dressed and puts her armor on, he basically tells her, hey, there's a town, like 28 people have died in the last week. So like,
Ooh.
or the last month. So like, that's way more than one Yoma is capable of dealing with you or capable of killing usually. So we think there's more than one, maybe even up to 5. So she's supposed to wait for help, but she's like, nah, fuck it. I don't think she thinks she's a badass. She just doesn't want to wait. She's like, I just want to do this thing. And this also kind of like, they don't care if they live or die. Like their job, they are here for one purpose, and that is to fight Yoma. And if they die, that's what was supposed to happen. If they don't, then you're all good. That's great. Next town, next Yoma, no big deal. So at least that's how she's coming at it in this. So she goes to this town and everything's shuttered. Nobody's outside. It's completely silent except one person who's waiting in the street for her. And he looks like a nice young man. But the second that she sees him, she's like, oh, so you're the Yoma. So he kind of reveals himself. And then he says like, oh, we were hoping there'd be more of you, Claymores, but, we'll take what we can get. So 3 more surround her on the street. And then it turns out there's one that's got wings and is flying because he's more transformed. And so they try to attack her. And this is where you get like the big epic fight scene where you see kind of how good she is at fighting. What do you think of this whole fight scene with the 5 different Yomas and her being badass?
Oh yeah, no, I absolutely love this, and especially like one's flying, so you got to watch out like above you now too. This was fantastic. Like that's the one thing, she's fighting him, and you see her eyes do the thing, but she doesn't really have much more a transformation. She's still able to go at them.
Yeah, her face doesn't transform as much as it did for that first one, probably because she knows like I can't fully freak out in this, or I can't expend too much power in this five person fight scene or fight because, I don't want to transform. So, but she does a move that actually is pretty like, she's very tactical. And I like this one because it shows that she's not just brute force or just like skilled with a sword. She's got tactics too, because she's outnumbered. So she pretends to fall and drops her sword. And then as the 2 Yoma are like, oh, she dropped her sword, attack. She like drops it into her other hand and basically left hands the sword and chops them in half. And so basically we see 1, she can handle the sword with both hands, which is useful. And then 2, she's able to think tactically about all these people or about fight in these fights. It's not just muscling everything. And then the only time she does transform at all is as she defeats all the people on the ground. The Yoma that's flying in the air is flying away. He's like, oh shit, I gotta get out of here. And so he's flying away, and so she transforms, or she lets a lot of power out to throw her Claymore sword into the air, and she whips it with her arm, and we see that her arm becomes like super transformed too. And then she throws the sword, it hits the Yoma right in the chest, and he falls to the ground. And so then she walks out and she's like, I'm done. Like, once again, off to go kill some more Yoma. That was crazy, but like, no big deal. That's what I do every day. So I thought I liked that fight scene a lot. Did you think that that was like, one? So there's 5 people she's fighting. Did you follow all the fights, the different people that she's fighting, all these different Yoma, or did you get confused at all?
No, I don't think I got confused because I mean they made it. I think they made it well enough. Like, yeah, most of them except for the one with the wings kind of look similar, but she cuts off an arm of one. So like when that one's in a panel, it only has one arm compared to like with the other 2 that are there. And then she does kill. She kills one in like kind of like catty corner in half before she drops it. So I was like, okay, like I think they did a good enough job, even though they look similar and there's a lot of the like movement lines
Yes.
of like keeping you aware of like who and kind of which ones were going down. And in particular, I really enjoyed when she does the drop. She cuts the 2 in half, like you said, and then again, you say that, like you said, she's tactical and she's like reading the situation. And I love her line. She's like, "Oh, like I was wondering why there were so many people dying, and I was like, why would they hunt in pack? Why would Yomas hunt in packs? They're supposed to be smart and strong." She's like, "Oh, that's because there are weak ones, and so they're too weak to survive on their own." And she like basically calls them all little bitches.
Yeah, they're like, oh, if you're in a pack, that means you're fucking lame. So,
Yeah,
beta.
so I was like, oh, exactly. So I was like, oh, okay, she's pretty badass.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought for this scene in particular, which could have got very confusing about who she's fighting and which one, they did a good job of like, I think the main guy that like she sees at first, he kind of always stays in his human form, at least enough so you notice he's got the same bangs and stuff, right? Like the same hairstyle. And then the other 3, she dispatches in certain ways so that oh, okay, that's that one, and these 2 that get cut in half are the other 2, and then the one that's flying is obviously flying and has wings. So like they did, the mangaka did a good job being able to discriminate for the reader who is who and who's fighting what. So after that, she leaves the town, like we said. Rubel goes to get the money from whoever, and then we cut to the next chapter where we see someone walking. We don't know who, but they're in like a desert, and they're fully covered, and they fall down like they've been like dying of thirst or something, or they're just completely exhausted. And we see behind them is the shadow or the silhouette of a Claymore. We don't know who, but we can assume it's supposed to be Claire. Then as we turn to the next page, we see that person that passed out in the desert was actually little Rocky, who has been searching for Claire ever since she left his village. And he's kind of been like one step behind her every time, following her from village to village after she's defeated the Yoma. So he's trying to catch up to her, but he wakes up in a unfamiliar room. Turns out he's in the next town that he was closest to, and a Claymore brought him in here. And he's like, oh, who was it? Was it, he thinks it's Claire. He's hoping it's Claire. And he's like, well, the innkeeper's like, well, she didn't say her name, but she paid for your room. Here's all the food you could ever want to eat right now. And so, but the second he says like, oh, you were brought in by one of those silver-eyed witches, he's like, oh my God, it's Claire. I'm going to go find her. So he like eats really quick and he runs out of the town. And, as he's in the town, he asks like, oh, did you see where the Claymore went? And they're like, oh yeah, she's in the woods, but she's already like a day out. She went to go track a Yoma over there. So, as Reiki is going through the woods, he hears, or he sees a Claymore in the like distance, and he's like, "Oh my God, Claire!" And then as he runs up on her, he sees, "Oh no, that's not Claire." Now, John, just for clarification, did you think this was Claire when he first saw her?
No, she looks different. She got the longer hair.
She has long hair, but she's still a young woman. Her armor is different. I think that's the giveaway
Yeah.
It's slightly different. It's similar, but slightly different. Now, this is where I'm going to mention what my main problem with this series is later on, you meet a lot more Claymores. And while the mangaka tries to give them different hairstyles and armor and like body types a little bit, a lot of them look similar in these battles. So sometimes I'm like, who the fuck just killed who? I don't know. I don't know who's killing what or what's going on sometimes. That's like my biggest beef with this series is because they have, like they say as part of like what a Claymore looks like is one, they got to be like a young female. Two, they all are kind of slender for the most part. I mean, there's some like more muscular ones, but they all have white hair and the same kind of looking eyes and yeah, like similar armor. So it's kind of like there's little changes in the armor, but no one's got brown hair because that's part of the Claymore, right? I think possibly the mangaka maybe wrote themselves into a box with that. Just as someone who's like written some stuff before, I'm like, I could see that you described this person in the first chapter, and then like 12 books in, you're like, fuck, I have 12 Claymores on a page, and they all have to have the same style or the same color hair. So I have to like, and the same color eyes. You can't make one with darker eyes. So you're like, oh, that's that one. Like, like they all have to have silver eyes and silver hair. You're like, fuck. So I don't know if, I mean, you might not have felt that at all because, like you said, you noticed that she wasn't Claire right away. But like later on, there is a little bit of confusion, at least for me, about who's who when they have these large groups of Claymores fighting.
For sure, and I can imagine that, especially like you said, if they are, and especially it's all in black and white. So if you have,
Yes,
more than like a handful of characters on the page that all are similar, like you could definitely lose track of them because yeah, you can only do uh so many different hairstyles and so many, and then once things are moving and there's action, that could definitely get lost in translation.
yeah, yeah, and I think later on, like I said, they do get like different body types, like more muscular and stuff. They could also, I don't think they, or at least don't think they've done this yet. They could also do like different skin tones and stuff. But I don't know where this is supposed to be. Like if it's just a magical world or if it's supposed to be like Japan or something. So they might just be sticking to one tone of skin for that reason. But yeah, like all the Claymores do have the same tone of skin, at least in this volume. And later on, I think they do too. But that would definitely differentiate, who's who. Is if you can't change the hair color, maybe the skin tone doesn't have to be what it is. I don't know. They don't, obviously, like you said, it's in black and white, so it's just paler than brown. So yeah. That might be something they add later on. I don't know. Like I've only got to volume 10, but yeah. So he sees this Claymore, and he starts asking her questions like, wait, you're not her. And are you the one that paid? Why did you pay for my food and stuff? And then as he approaches her, she says, oh, we Claymores are kind at heart. And he pauses and he's like, wait a second. You called yourself a Claymore. Claymores don't call themselves that. That's like that's your human. That's what humans call you. You don't call yourselves that. So then she's like, oh, you are clever. And then she transforms into a Yoma. So it turns out this is the Yoma that was attacking the village, but it's like transformed into a Claymore. I'm assuming, I don't know if you assume this, John, but maybe it has killed a Claymore before, and that is the one that it's taken.
Exactly. That's what I figured. I didn't think of like anybody going like full Yoma. I just was like, oh gosh, like this must be a powerful one if it looks like a Claymore because it probably killed it and then took that form.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of also ups the ante. This is very much like Dragon Ball Z, where like we have the first Yoma, and then you have to kind of power up each battle slightly to figure out like to really make the stakes high enough in each scene or whatever, in each battle scene. So
yeah.
So like the first one was just one guy and he was not too bad, but then you get 5. But then they put in the caveat, well, these are weaker ones, but there's 5 of them, so they're still dangerous. And then you get this one that's like obviously killed another Claymore, so it's got to be more powerful, right? So I like that. But immediately this Claymore takes him as hostage because it knows Claire is out in the woods looking for it, and just as it takes the boy hostage, Claire shows up and now ready to fight. So she does not even budge as far as seeing Rocky. Like she sees him, she stares at him just like he's a rock, basically. She's like, you might as well be holding, a tree or some shit. Like, I don't like, that's the attitude she's putting out. She doesn't say anything like she doesn't care about him or anything, but she's just like not saying anything and not even showing emotion on her face from seeing him. So basically the Yoma says like, well, I thought you Claymores didn't have feelings, but you know what? I saw you take this boy into town, so I decided this boy must mean something to you, so that's why I'm holding him hostage. And so she pulls out her sword like she's going to fight, but then she throws it on the ground, and this confuses the Yoma, of course. And the Yoma's like, well, fuck it. If you don't have your sword, I'm going to attack you. So she lets Rocky go, and the Yoma lets Rocky go, and then it rushes Claire, and then punches through Claire's chest or like abdomen. So at this point, John, what did you think? Because it's kind of like surprised, like why would she not fight?
Yeah, I was a little confused because I thought I thought there was definitely again some trickery because she says that she's tactical and smart and like thinks ahead. So I was like, okay, but then yeah, when it actually like gets this like his shoves its fist or its clawed hand through her abdomen, I was like, oh, well, that's weird. Like, was she gonna like heal too, or like what is this all about? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, but basically it's a ploy because now the Yoma's right next to her, and as she like falls to the ground, she falls close to that sword that she threw down, and she ends up. This actually gives her the chance to strike him or strike the Yoma with the sword. So she cuts off the hand that's inside of her, which I thought was pretty badass. And she still has it in her abdomen as she's fighting the Yoma, and then she like cuts its head in half horizontally, just like she did to that town's leader guy that was a Yoma. And then this Yoma dies, but I like she stands up, and as the blood spurts from it all over her, she's got the arm still like stuck in her abdomen, but it doesn't. She's not showing pain. She doesn't show any pain until she rips it out. And then when she rips it out, she's like kneels down on one knee like it does hurt. But then she kind of does her Yoma power concentration, and you see her face start to transform a little bit. And then the hole begins to heal itself. So through the Yoma energy, she does have like a healing factor, I guess you'd call it. So it's cool. Like I like that they're slowly revealing the powers of Claymores and what it means to have this Yoma blood in you. And then so as she heals, she stands up, and then immediately Rocky runs over to her, and she's like, "What are you doing here? Like, did the town throw you out?" And he's like, "No, I just wanted to find you." And then she has a flashback, and this is where we see when she was a little girl, a Yoma killed her mother, father, and it was actually her brother that did it. And we get this weird scene where I don't know if you got this from it, but the Yoma, her brother that is a Yoma, pushes her on the ground and is like on top of her. And I was like, did the Yomas do more than eat? Did you get that at all?
So like I will give that the position is drawn in is weird, but I just took it as like it's an overpowering situation.
Okay.
Like kill the parents, and she's like, okay, now I'm gonna kill because even the brother was like, yeah, I'm gonna enjoy ripping the flesh off of exactly. So I just took it as that. Like it's like she's obviously crying and whatnot. She's like, I can't believe you've done this. You're my brother. And then it's like, basically it would be like, pin her to the ground, like, well, yeah, I look like your brother, but I'm not, and I'm gonna eat you now, kind of thing. That's what it looks in the specifically the one panel, it looks like it could be controversial, but I am assuming because we haven't had anything really sexual,
Yeah.
overtly sexual in this, that is just like a position of power and like overcoming her, especially because she's a young girl at this point.
Okay.
That's all I took it as.
Yeah, me too. But like on second reading, I thought maybe there was something in that. But I will say later on, like in the other books, there's not really any of that. So it seems that they're not trying to say that necessarily. But it does look from this first book like possibly there's weird thing going on with the Yoma, but yeah, it doesn't ever bring that up again, at least of book 10. So I was like, okay, well, we'll just leave it there. But I wondered what you thought, this being your first time reading it, So she's having this, remembrance of this horrible thing that happened. And as the Yoma's on top of her, a Claymore comes and chops off his head. And obviously that's where she's like, oh, I want to be a Yoma. Like, I want this, I don't want to be a Yoma. I want to be a Claymore so I can kill all the Yomas. Like, that's what she wants in order to defeat, I guess, like in representation, kill the things that killed her parents, for revenge. So, but like I said, even if she did volunteer to be a Claymore, volunteer in quotation marks, like she's like 9 or something in this, so she looks very young. So I don't think you could volunteer for something that's transformative in your life or like traumatizing, especially after you went through that, right? She should just be in like a nice house with her uncle or something, and his family. So, but no, maybe he didn't. Maybe she didn't have any other relatives or something. But like you said, maybe it's like the orphanages, and they just like kind of like the church or something, where you got an orphanage, you can kind of take what you want for claymores from that stock. So, but yeah, basically, Claire softens because she sees Rocky crying and sees his similar situation to her when she was younger, and she's like, okay, can you cook? Like, if you can cook, you can come with me. And he's like, yeah, I cook, of course. I don't actually know if he can cook really good, but she lets him go with her. And we do see them, like, we go to the next chapter, and she is like, they're in the desert now, and she's like, oh, you said you can cook, your stomach's grumbling, I guess I could stop to eat. We do find out that they don't need to eat, like Claymores don't need to eat very often, like maybe once a week. Same with water, they only need to drink a little bit once a week. And so she like pulls her sword out, throws it, hits a lizard, and is like, okay, cook that. And so he cooks it. To me, it doesn't look that appetizing, but apparently it's fine.
You never know. Don't knock it till you try it.
That's
You gotta
true.
try anything once, right?
Maybe, I don't know. So, but he's eating it a lot. So she's like, okay. She takes a bite, and he's like, and then she like puts the leg down after she takes one bite, and he's like, oh, you don't like it? And she's like, oh, I barely eat like that. That for me was like a week's worth of food. So we're good. I'm all good. Thank you though.
She's
But
being
then,
polite.
huh?
She's being polite.
Yeah, there you go. But then she hears a noise, and so now they're kind of like in a forest where they cook this lizard. So she hears a noise. She goes through the trees like suspiciously looking for someone, and she sees Rubel waiting against a tree, and he tells her like, "Hey, I got something for you," and he gives her a black card. So we get the first introduction of this idea, and did they explain it right away? We do see it's got a symbol on it, and we did see before on her armor and her sword there is a symbol that kind of looks like a cross, it looks like a cross with like the middle of the middle T arms is broken and pointing upwards, but this one has an extra set of middle arms that is also pointing upwards. So it's not, obviously it means something to her because she gets a flash of like, what? But it's obviously not her symbol. And so she's like, hey, we have to go. Like she takes that card, goes back to Rocky, and is like, hey, we have to go. She doesn't even explain it, I don't think. She just quietly is like, we got to go. So we see them walking in like a rocky area, and it turns out that what that card means is when you are a Claymore and you basically are about to cross that line, you've had enough battles and you've used so much power and gotten to that line to fight Yoma, that you're going to become a Yoma, whether you want it or not. You can't fight it back anymore with your human side. So knowing that, you send a black card to one of the other Claymores that you want to kill you while you're still human. So she has done that. As they're walking, they see another Claymore, and her name is Elena, and they knew each other. Elena was friends with Claire in the convent, I guess, or whatever, or the Claymore training
Claymore
grounds.
Academy.
Yeah, Claymore Academy. There you go. The Hogwarts of Claymores. That's but she's like, you bet, like instantly Claire's like, okay, like I'm here. I guess we have to do this. Um, and is Claire? I don't remember. Is Claire actually like, you don't have to, like maybe you're not gonna change. Like maybe you can change back, or is she like all for it? I can't remember.
Claire's for it. It's Rocky that's
That's
kind of
right.
like, hey, are you sure like that you have to do this? Like she's basically like a sister to you. You know, you guys went through this together, whatnot. And she's like, you know, like, no, I'm here. This is what has to be done. And even the Elena's like, no, do it while I'm still human. You could
Yeah,
tell like
and do it
she's
fast
like,
because her face is like starting to transform as she's crying. Like it reminded me of um, like the tears are being forced out of her, not like she's like her face looks pretty normal, like she's smiling, but then there's
yeah,
tears. It almost reminded me of like Get Out. You remember in Get Out when
yes,
the cook, I think, is trying to say like, "Oh no, it's fine," but then like tears are coming out of her eyes. It reminded me of that.
oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Rocky's like, hold on to Claire's arm, like, you don't have to do this. She's your friend.
Yeah.
Stop. You don't have
Stop,
to.
Claire. Yeah, but Claire does not listen. She just like full force before Elena transforms, cuts her in half, and pretty violently she dies. And then they bury her and put her sword up on the little mound where they bury her. And we do see that the symbol on Elena's sword is the one that was on the card. So obviously, Claire's little symbol on her sword and her armor is specific to her. So that's a good little thing to know later on because each Claymore, as we meet them, have a different symbol. Once again, I think that's because they're trying to be able to differentiate while they're fighting and stuff, right? So to give something that shows like, oh, this is not Claire, or this is Claire, or you know. Um, but yeah, so obviously Rocky, as they stand in front of the grave, is very distraught and he doesn't understand why you had to kill her. But Claire is like, well, I mean, you just don't get it. Like this is what has to happen, or else she was going to turn into Yoma, and that's worse than death as a human, you know. So, and that is the end of Volume 1. We just left with that grave and that sword. So, with that being said, John, what did you give it, or what would you give it, and what did you think?
I loved it. I really enjoyed this one. Like we said, it was very straightforward, at least in this first volume. Um, you know, it left a couple of holes open of like, ooh, what is that? Where is that going to go? What is the who's Rubel really, and like what is the organization of, you know, where these claymores come from really. um I really enjoyed it. There wasn't any real romance. There wasn't any real any real like plot points to like, I guess, kind of like build like on another area. It was very straightforward of like, she kills these Yoma monsters. She is part, and eventually it will take her. And then for us as the reader, we have this boy who, you know, lost everything, that's going to go with her, that's learning this as we go, as we are as the reader go. That's going to, I assume, like, is how we're going to get some of this story. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I actually really want to read some more of this one. I'm glad to hear, like, from what you said, that in general, besides maybe the gals all looking similar, that it's pretty good. So I'm excited to read it. I enjoyed it, and I'm going to give it a solid 8.
Nice. Well, yeah. As far as this volume goes, they don't look similar to her. But like I said, when you get like 12 on a page, it's like, or more. They have some battles that have more than 12, I think. So it's like, eventually you get some that look similar enough that when there's all this battle fighting going on, it can get a little confusing. It's kind of, this happens with Terry Moore's books too, because, you know, at first in Strangers in Paradise, there's a certain number of cast and they look different enough that you don't get them too confused, or it's harder to get them confused. But now that he has enough characters and they're all interacting in his Terryverse, some of them I'm like, wait, who's talking right now? Is that this person or that person? Because they all look similar enough, or they can look similar enough depending which characters are in what scene. So I think that just happens when you don't really plan for something like that. But like I said, maybe at the first volume, they're like, oh, there's more Claymores, but they never envisioned them having to have like 40 claymores on a battlefield or something, you know? So when you have 40, they're bound to look similar, and you're just kind of like, hopefully I understand that's not the one that we need to focus, that like that's not our main girl or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So so you give it an 8. I'm going to give this an 8 too. I think it's pretty strong. I enjoy it. Like I said, I don't think it's as good as Berserk yet. I've only got to volume 10, so maybe I'm wrong on that, but I could see like how it definitely is a badass comic. It definitely is worth the like accolades it gets. And I'm enjoying it. So like I'm not like what's it called, aggressively like reading it like I must read the next volume, but I'm like, oh, let me read the next Claymore. After like a month I haven't read the other one, so I'm like, oh, let me read the next one, it was good. And then like I'm reading it at a pace as opposed to like just completely dropping it and forgetting about it. Or like with Berserk, I was like, I need to know what happens, and I read like 40 volumes in like a week. So so it's not quite there for me, but you know, other people have had different feelings towards it. They've liked it a lot. So, and like I said, they do say it is just as good as Berserk. So, that is, we'll figure. I'll be the judge of that, everybody. All right, I'll be the one who decides that by the end of this. So, yeah, I give it an 8. You give it an 8. With that being said, like we said at the beginning of this, if you guys want to listen to the exclusive podcast this week or this month, which is Berserk Volume 1, we're going to be doing, or not Volume 1, it's Volume 1 of the deluxe series, but it's the first 5 volumes. We're going to be doing the Golden Age. We're going to cover all of it for beginning in March Manga Madness, but continuing for the next 3 months as we do 3-part series on it. And this is John's first step or foray into Berserk, so I'm very excited about that, and I can't wait to talk about it. So if you guys would like to hear that, if you're interested in that, definitely join our Patreon at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, where you will hear me gush about the series and defend probably stuff that John might not like or whatnot, but we'll see.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Well, I just mean like, you know, you might not love it as much as I do, and probably, I will say, the first volume, I was not in love with it yet either. So if you don't love it, don't feel weird or whatever. Everybody kind of agrees at the beginning. There was a little bit of a, we're figuring out exactly what this is, and then by the second, by part 2 of our series, you will be fully into it. So, or you will hate it. If you hate it, then we're still going to read all 3, but we'll have a more interesting discussion about it then. So yeah, like we said, if you'd like to listen to that, and also vote on our Patreon, or vote on the Patreon for our second podcast of each month, which is what this was. Claymore won that. So if you would like to do that, join us again at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books. So unless you got anything else, John. Oh yeah, you know what? I will say I would like to thank our patrons. Speaking of patrons, Hoku, Otaku, Mike, Christian, Matthew, Kyla, Joseph, Kalia, and Isaiah. You guys are awesome. You keep the lights on. We love you all. And hopefully you're enjoying all the exclusive stuff that's on Patreon. And if you guys have any suggestions for books, like the last podcast we did was on Appleseed, and that was a suggestion from a patron. So if you guys have any, you know, stuff you want us to read, stuff we might not be aware of, definitely shoot us a message on Patreon. Let us know. And you know, we'll definitely put that on the list of stuff we want to read. Because we very much value you guys' opinions and recommendations. So,
yeah, Matt is not the end all. Matt is not the end all be all of comic.
That's not true.
Say so. So yeah, and if you guys want me to, you know, suggest a comic for Matt to read,
no, that's not gonna happen.
I get vetoed so often. So I'm like, oh, let's read this one, and Matt's like, no, we're not reading that. Or, hey, what about a Star Wars comic? It's been a while. No, John, I hate Star Wars. So I'm kidding.
If you do that, patrons, I will read it, but I will not like it. All right, I will.
That's true.
It will be very hard for. I won't say I won't like it, but what I will say is there is an uphill battle. If you're thinking Matt just needs to read the right Star Wars comic, and I have it, and you make John veto or whatever and throw that out, then I will read it. But it will be an uphill battle, and I might say something sucks that you really like, because I don't like this thing. So I am predisposed to not liking certain things. So
And that's part of the reason we love him. He's honest, and he gives it. He doesn't beat around the bush. He tells it like it is.
hey, and I could be wrong. Maybe I will love something. I don't know. I've read lots of stuff that I was like, I'm going to hate this, and then it ended up being okay. I mean, an example of that was like Miss Marvel. I was like, I'm probably not going to like this, and then I read it and was like, it was fun. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like the best thing I ever read, but I didn't hate it with like a severely visceral reaction or something. So,
Yeah.
and I've read lots of comics like that, where even like Strangers in Paradise, I just read that randomly thinking this is not a comic I would normally read, but like, I think Terry Moore was in town signing, and I bought it, and I was like, let me check it out. And it was the first comic I ever read that wasn't a superhero book. And I was like, wow, this is so not a book I thought I would love, but I ended up loving all of Terry Moore's stuff. So, I'm surprised every now and then. And so suggestions are welcome. Just know I'm predisposed to maybe not liking certain properties like Star Wars or other things. So, take with that what you will.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you again. And I guess with that, we'll see you on the next one.
On the next one.
Bye.